our listeners a little bit at what you do.
All right. Well, thanks, Brian. It's good to be here. One of the parts of my practice is I represent homeowners or any type of property owners who are having some sort of issues with their banks, whether they are in foreclosure or in default or are being evicted wrongfully. And I will take a look at their case and defend their rights against the bank and go after the banks.
Now, was there a year where this really was hot and heavy? I mean, I know what happened in 08, 09 with the whole mortgage. Was that kind of a peak time for you?
That was, yeah. And it was actually, at that time, I was working for the banks.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
The first 5.5 years of my practice, I was on the other side, and I was representing lenders in their foreclosure proceedings and was representing them in the court system to be able to take the collateral that had been pledged as collateral in these secured loans. And I did not go out on my own until after the 08 crash. And because it was at that time, I really saw a lot of the abuse that was happening from the homeowners.
I know you saw The Big Short. You had to watch that movie.
I saw The Big Short,
okay.
Yes.
And I didn't ask you earlier before we came on, but I meant to. I saw it for the first time not too long ago, and it was an eye-opener.
It is. It is. The times of 08 and 07 and even in 09, and it really is still happening right now, just on a different level, the vast amounts of money that occurred. It was really when home mortgages began to be traded on the secondary market, quite frankly, when the banks that owned the notes at the time. So, for example, when you walk into your mortgage company and you get a bank loan to purchase your home, when that bank needs some extra capital, they'll sell it off to another entity who will bundle it, for lack of a better word, with a bunch of other home loans. So, for example, if you have a mortgage and another entity is servicing your mortgage, you might be bundled with 6,000 other homeowner loans, and it is used as an investment product that these other entities are actually investing in on behalf of their clients.
Yeah. If you have not seen The Big Short, I highly recommend you see that movie. It's an eye-opener. Okay, so someone calls you because why?
Various reasons, but as far as the foreclosure aspect of my practice, someone receives a notice of foreclosure, for example. They'll call my office and say, Rachel, I don't understand. Either I'm in default. A lot of times my clients are in default.
And they know this, right?
And they know this,
okay.
Absolutely. And but they'll call me because they have spent months upon months trying to work something out with the banks, and the bank's representatives on the other line were telling them over the telephone certain bits of information, but for whatever reason was not communicated with the arm that is sending out those foreclosure notices.
Okay. So once they get this notice, and we talked a little bit before the show, how banks sometimes aren't the most upfront and trustworthy organizations, and they kind of lead people down a path and we can debate until the cows come home, which I hope they don't, because I don't have a way to fence them in. If that was intentional, or is it just the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing?
Exactly. Right. And I think that's a toss-up. There are certain times where I believe that you wonder whether it is just an organizational failure as a whole, or if the person up top is directing orders and has created an organization for the sole purpose of having that organizational failure, so that at the end of the day, the banks make money. Because remember, in this 08 crash, there were many, many banks and many entities and many investors that made millions upon millions of dollars because of people who lost their homes as a sole result of people that lost their homes.
Has any legislature come forward to kind of change things so that doesn't happen again?
Absolutely. The Consumer Protection Finance Bureau the legislature has several types of precautionary measures that they're requiring banks to take. And by banks, I mean whether they're servicing your mortgage, because that's really a part of the equation. There's so many different entities that are in play here. There's the underlying owner who owns your mortgage, and then there's also the servicer. And the servicer is the guy that handles your day-to-day payments. That's who you actually write your mortgage loan payments every year. And yes, there are certain protections that the government has put into place, but it's a work in progress, and there's still quite a bit of abuse that's happening.
And you're still busy. it's still happening.
There's a wave. Yes, the 2008 was really the start of it. But now we're seeing some law come down. That was the hard part, too. The courts they were flooded with a lot of the quote-unquote stall tactics that were happening in the very beginning stages. And as a result, there wasn't a lot of law. But thankfully, we're coming down where we're getting some law out of it, and we're getting a little bit of traction, for a while. And still, even today, the homeowner, unfortunately, is at a disadvantage. So you have got to have someone that knows how to navigate those waters.
Absolutely. Rachel Khirallah joining us live in the studio talking about real estate, foreclosure, and I see construction on your website. Kind of walk me through that. We didn't really talk about that before the show.
Sure. So I represent homeowners who have purchased whether they've purchased a piece of property or a commercial piece of property, so not even just a homeowner, property owner, and whether there are defects in the residential property that they purchased that either the owner didn't disclose to them, or if they purchase a brand new home and the builder has there are some issues with the property and the builder's just not coming to the table to help fix it. I'll represent a property purchaser in those types of situations.
I like that. And I bet that happens a lot, too.
It does. That's a hard, as we were talking about earlier, the litigation system. It's its own beast, and it is expensive. Those claims are hard to litigate, and I think a lot of those companies know that, which is why, again, a lot of those property owners are at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I know firsthand. I had a family member develop a shopping center down in South Florida. Speaking of Florida, maybe that's where my hatred comes from. Developed a shopping center, built the Starbucks and all this stuff down there, and the builder, quite honestly, did not come through on what was agreed upon. Lawsuit happened in result of that. And I think the verdict, it was like $2 million against us. I say us, family, on that matter. So yeah, we lost that. So to prove your point, yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of ammo there.
Well, and most likely you're probably in arbitration too.
Because, you went to arbitration,
yeah, of
right,
course,
correct.
Because the only way you're allowed to even buy a home or or lease out, purchase shopping center from these builders who a lot of times are the developers as well. So they've all you purchase it from them. Is you have to agree to an arbitration, and these arbitrators, more likely than not, know that those builders are their repeat customers, and as a result, unfortunately, you don't have a right to a jury trial.
Or what if the builder went to the bank and would get more funds to pay for? I guess the invoicing was too low, so they had to go. The bank was just literally sending out payment to the contractor without notifying us. The owner. I mean, it was jacked up. Yeah. I probably should have called you back then. I wish I would have known you back then.
I've seen it happen.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff happened as a result of that. I mean, a lot of homes had to be sold to pay off attorney fees and everything else in the world. It's crazy. So this is a hot market. I mean, we live in North Texas is a very hot real estate market. I'm just kind of wondering what the pulse is right now for you. It still happens, right? I mean, what people call you, whether or not the market's high or low, or I mean, everyone. I guess not everyone, but there's a good percentage of homeowners that fall into these categories of kind of getting in some trouble.
Yeah, I receive anywhere from 10 to 15 calls per week regarding these types of issues with folks facing foreclosure or some sort of issue with their bank. And you're right that it constantly changes with the market. However, it's always pretty steady in the sense of, at the end of the day, the banks, whether it's in 2008, whether it's in 2010 or 17, they're all acting in similar ways.
Yeah. We got to take a break. Rachel Khirallah is joining us in the studio. The website is KHIRALLASHP That's a mouthful.com. We'll post up a link. As a matter of fact, I already have a link up on my Facebook page. I did it the first thing this morning. Go to that for more information. Also, I'll see if you have any questions on that. I'll check my inbox on Facebook. We'll take a break, come back. I'm going to find out kind of like who perhaps the banks really target. Is there any one ideal client of yours? We'll talk about that. Plus, the signs that you may need a new job. Do you need a new job? Do you like your job?
I do. I hear the boss is okay.
The boss is okay. She's personable. She knows a lot. She knows her stuff. All right, you can keep it. Give us a few minutes. We'll come right back.
From Wall Street to North Texas, this is 620 AM, KEXB, your experts in business.
As far as one client that I see the most, it really just depends. So, for example, I handle a lot of reverse mortgage litigation.
Okay.
And so as a result of that, that obviously they're elderly clients that typically, I shouldn't even say elderly. It's 62 years of age and older. That's not elderly.
62 is a new 72
yeah,
probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as far as the reverse mortgage litigation, but as far as the foreclosure litigation is concerned, I don't know that I see necessarily one specific type of client. What I have noticed that there is absolutely no protection for a lot of our Spanish-speaking borrowers, where they are if you can imagine when communication is already at issue with even English-speaking borrowers, when you compound that when English is not your first language, there is absolutely no precautionary measures that have been taken to help protect them. And it's one thing if a bank is explaining something to a Spanish-speaking borrower and actually lives by what they're saying, but when it's different than what the documents are in front of you, that's when it's an issue. And the banks are profiting off the Spanish-speaking borrowers. That's the problem too. They're not getting a lower commission or a lower interest rate just because they speak Spanish only. They're getting it just the same as everyone else.
And we talked a little bit before the show about this reverse mortgage, and as long as it is perfectly understood and everybody kind of knows the facts, it's okay. It's when the facts aren't represented, or maybe someone just doesn't understand them about the spouse at 62 and.
Exactly.
It could be good and it could be bad.
Right. I don't have terrible things to say about reverse mortgages being a retirement product, because for several folks that's their best case scenario, and those reverse mortgages, if you've got some equity in your home, they're not necessarily a bad thing as long as there's transparency, and that's the problem. There is no transparency when it comes to the banks and borrowers.
And hopefully there's, like you said earlier, there's been some legislation that can kind of clear that up and protect the consumer a little bit more.
The legislature's trying. It's unfortunately just creating a whole other mess out there right now that we're dealing with. But at the end of the day, reverse mortgages is its own world in and of itself, and you just have to have someone that is familiar with that product to be able to explain it and you trust. And unfortunately, a reverse mortgage broker isn't always the best one, because there's commissions. They stand a commission, and it is what it is. So,
in some of these, when you take on a client and you guys take on a bank and you have a lawsuit, this can go over for a while.
Yes,
nothing's settled. This is not people's court.
Well, no.
Judge Waltman doesn't come out here after 28 minutes and throw down the gavel, and you have
and the banks count on that because they want to, for lack of a better word, bleed the homeowners dry. They know these homeowners can't afford this long, drawn-out litigation, so why not take a stab at it and see what happens?
You remind me of something years ago when I was in television. I had a buddy that was going to take on Sony, and he goes, I'm going to sue Sony. I go, yeah, good luck with that. Yeah. You and your $500 an hour attorney, it won't last very long. So that's an excellent point. I mean, they know that the average homeowner cannot extend over years without essentially bankrupting them, probably, or
right. Unless you've got our firm. That's why I left the firm life and went and opened my own practice 6.5 years ago. Was exactly that reason, because you have got. I wanted to be able to give access to the legal network to those who can't afford it otherwise.
Nice.
So
I like that. So what do you do if you're facing foreclosure right now? I mean, literally, if you're listening to us right now and you're like, ooh, I got to get a hold of you, what's the first step?
I think it even steps a little bit even behind that. Even if you're not facing foreclosure, but you're having trouble making your mortgage payments, and you contact the bank, there are certain things that the bank will tell you over the telephone. Other than calling my firm and my office to talk through that.
Which, by the way, is 214-302-0462. There you go.
Aside from doing that, the first thing to do, any representation that the bank makes to you, you have to get it in writing.
So how do you do that? Because if they say, well, what's your email address? Do you want them to mail you a letter? I mean, how do you...
No, and that's a great
Do they give
question.
you a runaround on that? Because they'll
Yes.
say, I'm sorry, I can't send out messages from here.
Brian, that's a perfect question. And you're right. The bank will not. The bank will not take your email address. The bank will not send you an email. Some of my best cases are when the banks actually do send something out in writing. The best advice I can offer you is to take copious notes of the name of the person you talked to, the day you spoke to them, the time you spoke to them, and all of the representations. Put that together in a letter yourself and memorialize that conversation. You, bank, represented this to me. You represented this to me. And memorialize the entire conversation.
Because are they doing the same on their end? Do they have a screen full of notes and they're typing in? Because I'm always curious about that.
Technically, yes. But
Okay.
it's unfortunately, even in litigation, when you're allowed those call notes is what they call
Call
them.
notes.
You don't always get them, and they're impossible to interpret. The banks don't even understand. The representatives you depose don't understand what was written in them. So write that letter and send it in certified mail to the address of the bank. Let someone sign for it and send it back. And at the end of that letter, write, if you disagree or if this does not accurately reflect our conversation, please contact me. Because at that point, you've got something in writing. You've sent it off to the bank. The bank has received it. And then it's up to them to contact you. I'm not saying it's going to work every time, but the more detail you
Good
have,
strategy.
the better you have to fight it out in court.
Yeah. I could see that.
And you're not alone. You're not alone. That's
Yeah.
the thing. So many homeowners are in this position, whether it's medical issues that are causing you to run late on your payments, whether it's there are a multitude of reasons that happen. But for whatever reason, even if you have missed payments and you are in default, doesn't mean that the bank isn't required to follow the law and they're not required to do what they're required to do. I'm not saying that you're going to succeed or get a huge verdict or even save your home. However, if you believe that the bank is not following the law and if you believe that they told you one thing or doing the other, you have rights.